Welcome to True Echo, where real courage, untold strength, and the power of justice come to life. Today's story is about a woman who simply wanted peace, but instead faced intimidation and danger on her own front porch. What the trespassers didn't know. They had just challenged a retired Special Forces operator, whose team was already nearby. This isn't just a story about confrontation, it's about presence, power, and the quiet strength that never blinks first. Tasha Merryweather didn't move to Willow Haven to stand out. She moved for quiet mornings, safe streets, and the rare luxury of breathing without looking over her shoulder. A decorated veteran with 2 bronze stars, she'd seen more conflict zones than most would dare to imagine. After 16 years in U.S. Army Special Forces, the last thing she expected was a new kind of confrontation, right on her front porch. It started with a knock. Not rushed or panicked, deliberate. Like a signal. At 6:43 p.m., sun still hanging low in the sky, birds chirping, Tasha's instincts tingled before her German shepherd even moved. Ranger usually barked if someone approached with tension. But this time, silence. That alone told her something was wrong. When she opened the door, chain still latched, the sight was absurd: 3 men in ill-fitting tactical gear, mirrored sunglasses, and self-importance puffed up like parade floats. The tallest, with a tan and a weak chin masked by a forced goatee, flashed what could only be described as a laminated printout from Office Depot. "We're with Willow Haven's Homeowners Compliance Task Force," he said, as if those words carried weight. Tasha narrowed her eyes. "Compliance Task Force?" "Yes, ma'am. We patrol for code issues. You've been flagged, Code 14B. Improper flag hanging." She almost laughed. Her flag, the same one passed down from her father, a veteran before her, was hung with care and precision. This wasn't a citation, it was a pretext. A power play. "Where's the HOA office?" she asked. "Off Sycamore, near the pool," the man said. "That's a storage shed," she replied flatly. She'd lived here 6 months. She knew every corner. The third man, with a tattoo creeping up his neck, unhooked a taser from his belt, not raised, but on display. An escalation. And that's when Ranger appeared behind her, calm, poised, alert. No bark. Just presence. Like his owner. Tasha stepped outside, shutting the door behind her. Feet planted on the welcome mat that read, "Come correct or don't come at all." "You said Code 14B, she repeated. Goatee nodded. "Doesn't exist," she said. "And unless you have a real badge or valid authority, what you're doing is impersonation. That's a felony." Tattoo neck shifted. Gum-chewing sidekick fidgeted. But Goatee, Rick, she'd learn later, held up the taser. "I'll have to escort you." She stepped forward. "You sure about that?" Then came the shift. A car door closed behind them. Then another. Then another. From the driveway, the backyard, behind a parked SUV, figures emerged. Calm, steady, silent. Rick turned and froze. Who are they?" Tasha smiled. "Old friends." They weren't just friends. They were the Red Line 5. Women Tasha had served with. Fought with. Survived with. Leah, the smallest of the group, but probably the most lethal, stood closest. Drea leaned against the fence. Natalie came up the sidewalk like she was on patrol in Baghdad. They didn't need to posture. Their very presence rewrote the energy on that lawn. The men had walked into what they thought was a soft target. But they'd walked into a nest of trained killers. "You gonna tell us again how the flag's a few inches off?" Leah asked, her tone like someone requesting extra sugar in her tea. Rick blustered. "You're in violation. This is about standards. We're HOA security." "No," Drea cut in. "It's not. I read the bylaws this morning, after your goons parked their toy cart in front of our driveway. There's no 14B. The neighbors were watching now, peeking out of blinds, stepping onto porches. Someone was filming. Rick was red-faced, sweating despite the breeze. But his voice still puffed up. We just want order. By threatening women with weapons? Leah said, stepping closer. You're not law enforcement. You're a liability. Tasha stayed calm, voice steady. I've had people pull guns on me in countries where I didn't speak the language. You think I'm going to flinch at a guy with a fake badge and an Amazon vest? They didn't respond. But the sirens in the distance answered for them. By the way, Tasha added, I called the real cops when you pulled up. The sound of sirens grew louder, slicing through the quiet neighborhood like a warning bell. Rick stiffened, his fingers twitching near the taser still clipped to his leg. Gum Chewer muttered something low, barely audible over the rising tension. Tattoo Neck's eyes darted from the approaching cars to the people now gathering at the edges of their lawns. The illusion of control was gone. All that was left was exposure. Hands where I can see them, barked the deputy as the black and white cruiser cut off the golf cart 2 blocks away. Deputy Flores, short and broad with sharp eyes and zero patience, stepped out like a man already done with whatever nonsense awaited him. We're neighborhood security, Rick said quickly, stepping forward like credentials might fall from the sky if he sounded confident enough. We're part of the HOA. Flores didn't blink. Do you have law enforcement certification? We don't need it. It's private property. We're authorized, Rick's voice faltered as Flores raised one hand. These IDs are fake, Flores said, inspecting the laminated joke Rick had flashed earlier. This taser makes it a weapons violation. And you're on private property with no legal authority. That's impersonation. By the time Rick, Gum Chewer, and Tattoo Neck were cuffed and loaded into the cruiser, the crowd at Tasha's home had thickened. One elderly couple brought lemonade. A teenager from across the street quietly gave Tasha a thumbs up. The atmosphere had changed, less tension, more awakening. Back at the porch, Flores turned to Tasha. We'll need formal statements from you and your guests. She nodded. They're all former military. They'll cooperate. That raised Flores' eyebrow. All of them? Special forces. Retired. Visiting. He exhaled. Well, guess they picked the wrong porch. As Tasha gave her statement, Leah stepped off the porch to join Drea, who stood calmly, arms crossed. Natalie hovered nearby, ever the silent observer, cataloging faces, body language, exits. They weren't on a mission, but the training never left them. When Flores returned, clipboard in hand, he gestured toward the lawn. Mind telling me what started all this? Tasha pointed at her flag. He said it was hung wrong. Cited a fake code. Tried to force me to go with them. Leah added, that's not a citation. That's attempted kidnapping. And I'd bet money this wasn't the first time, Drea said flatly. It wasn't. The next morning, Tasha's inbox exploded. The first message came in at 6:01 a.m., subject line, thank you. It was short. One neighbor saw everything. Said it wasn't the first time Rick and his buddies had done this, just the first time they picked the wrong door. By 9 a.m., Tasha had 14 more messages. By noon, nearly 40. Leah, always the organizer, began compiling a spreadsheet. 8 months. 22 residents. Every single one had 2 things in common: they'd been targeted by Rick's so-called compliance team, and they weren't white. They weren't enforcing anything, Drea muttered as she scrolled through the data. They were racially profiling under the HOA's nose. Or worse, under its protection. Tasha pulled out her thick folder of HOA bylaws, flipping through until she found what she suspected, buried deep in Section 6, a vague clause authorizing volunteer oversight groups for neighborhood order and decorum. Decorum, she repeated. That's what they called it. That afternoon, she called the HOA president, Connie Bradford, demanding an emergency meeting. At first, Connie brushed her off. "It'll have to wait for the monthly meeting." "I have the video," Tasha said. Suddenly, the schedule opened up. By 6 p.m., 30 residents packed into the small community center behind the tennis courts. Tasha didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply stood in the front row, calm, her flag pin visible on her hoodie, and let the video play. When it ended, silence. Connie cleared her throat. The compliance group was acting in what they believed was the neighborhood's best interest. "They impersonated police," Leah replied. "They pulled weapons on people. They did it over and over. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern." Tasha stepped forward. "I've served in places where breaking protocol could get someone killed. Even there, we didn't invent authority when we didn't have it." A slow clap started. Then another. The room was shifting. Again. Connie caved. "We're suspending the compliance group, effective immediately." "Not enough," Tasha said. "We want their names, the complaint records, and a written policy barring anyone from ever doing this again." By the time the meeting ended, the board had no choice but to agree. But Tasha wasn't finished. That night, she made a call to Brixton Hale. Brixton Hale answered on the second ring. "Been a while, Merryweather," he said, his voice carrying that familiar mix of sharpness and weariness that only years in law enforcement can create. "Too long," Tasha replied. "But I've got something you'll want to see." She sent the files, videos, statements, the HOA bylaws, and the spreadsheet Leah compiled. When he called her back 30 minutes later, his tone had shifted. "Normally, HOA issues stay civil," he said. "But this? Impersonation, weapon threats, racial targeting, this is criminal." "Then charge them," she said. "We're building the case." "But if that board knew and did nothing?" "They didn't just know," Tasha cut in. "They paid for it." The evidence was buried in old meeting minutes, an approved request for reflective gear and patrol cart maintenance. Minor funds. Approved 4-2. Leah found it, buried like a dead thing under bureaucratic language. They had funded Rick's uniforms, badges, the gear that gave his little fantasy operation its fake sense of legitimacy. "That makes them complicit," Brixton said. Tasha nodded. "And I'm not stopping until everyone who enabled this faces consequences." By morning, the story had leaked. A blurry cell phone video, captioned, "Fake HOA cops pull taser on black homeowner, she's ex-military," exploded online. Comment sections filled with divided voices. Some praised her. Others, hidden behind flags and eagle avatars, accused her of overreacting. Tasha didn't care. She wasn't doing this for comments. She was doing it for the woman 2 doors down who was too afraid to mow her lawn before 9 a.m., and for the teenage boy across the street who had stopped skateboarding after being followed home. For every silent neighbor who thought they were alone. That silence was ending. The next few days were relentless. Testimonies poured in, emails, handwritten notes, even quiet knocks at the door from neighbors who had once looked through her like she didn't exist. Some came in tears. Others came angry. But they came. And Tasha listened. Each story was another match dropped on dry brush. And then came the most damning revelation of all. Rick Dalton had created a company. Community Order Services, an actual LLC registered under his name. No employees except Rick, Nolan Sharp, and Greg Hansley. No contracts, no authority, just a P.O. box in nearby Menifee and a fantasy built on intimidation. He passed out flyers. Collected voluntary donations. Sold patrol packages. He wasn't just playing cop, he was extorting people. One single mother admitted she paid Rick $30 a month just to make sure he wouldn't harass her kids. Another couple confessed they stopped giving when Rick made cryptic comments about their biracial granddaughter, dropping by too often. "It's not security," Tasha said, gripping her coffee cup. "It's a shakedown." Diane Covey, their civil rights attorney, didn't mince words. "You've got enough for a full civil suit. Harassment. Discrimination. Enabling criminal behavior. If this goes public, it won't just change this neighborhood. It could flip HOA policy across the state." Tasha didn't want fame. She wanted safety. Transparency. Accountability. But change had to start somewhere. Diane filed the lawsuit that same week, naming Rick Dalton, Greg Hansley, Nolan Sharp, and every HOA board member who had approved or funded the compliance group. She also forwarded the files to the California Department of Consumer Affairs. A fire had been lit. And it wasn't just online. Local media picked up the story. Then regional. Then radio. Not just a story about confrontation on a porch, but a community that had enabled fear and called it order. The real victory, though, was quieter. Neighbors who once averted their eyes now waved. One couple brought over pie. A skateboarder high-fived Ranger as he passed. Small moments. But they meant everything. Even Dolores, the elderly woman with the oxygen tank and lawn frogs, walked across the street, pressed a photo into Tasha's hand, and whispered, "It took a long time to feel safe here. You made it faster." Inside the photo was a younger Dolores with her late husband, a retired Air Force mechanic, holding the American flag on their wedding day. That photo went into Tasha's desk drawer, right next to the handwritten note from a mother whose son had been scared to walk to school. But the biggest confrontation was still ahead. The final town hall meeting. The room was packed. Folding chairs filled. Walls lined with standing neighbors. Eyes alert. Phones out. Connie Bradford was gone, resigned quietly with a vague email about focusing on family. Tasha stood at the front. No podium. No microphone. Just her voice. "I moved here for peace," she began. "After years overseas, I just wanted to walk my dog, fix up a home, and feel safe." The room was still. Listening. But what I got was a group of armed men with fake badges, sanctioned by silence. She looked out across the crowd. "Let me be clear, you shouldn't have to be military to feel safe on your porch. Safety shouldn't depend on your background, your gender, or the color of your skin." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It's not about being brave. It's about being willing. Willing to say no. Willing to speak up. Willing to tell people with fake power that it ends here. The applause started slow, then grew. A standing ovation. But it wasn't for her strength. It was for what she'd made everyone else realize about their own. The fallout came swiftly. Rick Dalton pled guilty to impersonating a law enforcement officer and unlawful use of a stun gun. His plea deal included a $15,000 fine and 6 months of house arrest. Some said it was too lenient for the fear he inflicted. But the DA made it clear, this was just the beginning. Greg Hansley and Nolan Sharp, the other two fake enforcers, struck their own deals: probation, mandatory community service, and court-ordered public apologies to the residents they'd targeted. But the real change, the kind that couldn't be measured in court orders, was unfolding on the very streets Rick once tried to patrol. The HOA board, under intense public pressure and legal scrutiny, crumbled from within. 2 members resigned within a week, no press releases, no explanations. Just gone. Connie Bradford vanished from the HOA website the day after Tasha's town hall speech. Her resignation email was as empty as her oversight, stepping down to spend more time with family. But Tasha and her team weren't interested in symbolic exits. They wanted systems dismantled. A full board election was called, something that hadn't happened in over a decade. And for the first time, a diverse slate of candidates stepped forward, teachers, retirees, young parents, even Drea. She didn't campaign with signs or promises, just a 5-minute video clip of her saying, "You shouldn't need combat boots to defend your driveway." She won in a landslide. The new board enacted sweeping reforms. No private citizen was allowed to patrol, detain, or question neighbors. HOA meetings were live-streamed and archived. A rotating committee of residents now reviewed all complaints, no more gatekeeping. Tasha didn't run for office. She didn't want a title. But she remained ever-present. Walking ranger. Answering questions. Making quiet calls when something smelled off. One afternoon, a high schooler, one of the same teens who used to skate past her house, stopped mid-ride and said, "It feels different now." Tasha smiled. Difference a start. That same week, an email popped into her inbox from a teacher in a nearby county. Subject line, "Would you speak to our students about community courage?" She didn't say yes right away. But she didn't delete it either. That evening, she walked over to Dolores's house. The old woman had chili on the stove and 2 ceramic bowls already steaming. Midway through their meal, Dolores looked up and said something that lingered long after the dishes were cleared. "You know what I've noticed?" she asked. "People don't close their doors as fast anymore." Tasha paused. "Because they're not afraid?" Dolores smiled. "No. Because they're learning not to be." And that, Tasha realized, was the real victory. Not the headlines. Not the lawsuit. Not even the criminal charges. It was the slow, stubborn return of trust, block by block, conversation by conversation. A neighborhood no longer pretending to be safe but working to become safe. All because one woman refused to step back when 3 men in dollar store tactical gear told her to. Tasha Merryweather never wanted to be a symbol. She didn't ask to be a leader. She just didn't blink when it counted. And maybe that's the story we forget to tell, that real strength isn't loud. It doesn't shout from porches or hide behind badges. It's quiet. Steady. Unshakable. And when it rises, it changes everything. Some heroes wear uniforms. Others wear hoodies and walk their dogs through quiet neighborhoods. Tasha Merryweather didn't confront a hostile foreign enemy, she stood up to fake authority, bad policy, and community silence. And by doing so, she reminded everyone that real power lies not in control, but in courage. As she said, "You shouldn't have to be trained to be treated with respect. If this story inspired you, speak up. Stand firm. And if you believe stories like Tasha's deserve to be heard, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video with someone who needs to remember what strength really looks like."